speaking in public on the topic of religion. It's not the sort of thing you can find many professionals doing regularly, so I'm a little bit nervous, but really happy to be here. I want to echo everything Bruce said. It's very important, I think, that as communities we expose ourselves to the beliefs of others, challenge our ideas. So whether you're here to support me or you're one of those challenging yourselves, very good of you to come. Very happy to be here. As Bruce said, I was raised in a really religiously lax household in Terrace. Never encouraged to go to church or pray, but it wasn't loosely Christian belief in God in the home. I became interested in the topic of religion around the time I was working at McDonald's at about 15. I've actually never told a soul this before, but it was around that time a coworker of mine, he was really into these videos circulating by a notorious creationist. Some of you might have heard of his name's Ken Holden. And I was interested in the topic of religion, but I was kind of embarrassed to be interested. I actually waited until my brother left for his baseball games. My parents went to cheer him on just so I could watch these in private and analyze them. And I found I could refute about half of what he said off the top of my head, and I was still in high school, so I wasn't satisfied by the rest of it. I wondered what made people believe this sort of thing. And it snowballed from there. I've got many religious friends today, and it's just more and more over the years. A lot of them are here. Thank you very much. That's what got the ball rolling. So I guess I should start by talking a little bit about what atheism actually is. I mean, it's a very simple concept, but we've actually had people that just so immersed in a religion themselves that they really had to spell it out. So I've had to say, well, do you believe in God? No. Do you believe in an afterlife? No. Do you believe in angels? No. Miracles? No. Heaven? No. Hell? No. It really is a very simple proposition that you don't believe in God, but and I'm sure Catholics and Protestants and Sunnis and Shiites will appreciate this. There's kind of two ways of using the word. There's the default position that everyone's born with. Newborn babies, they have no conception of God. They are an atheist in the sense that they are not a theist. But I, of course, am trying to take it a step farther. I've actually thought about it and decided positively against it. I don't just not believe it, I disbelieve it. Now, I'm kind of in the unfortunate circumstance that being such a simple belief, it's not the kind of thing I can talk about at great length, just repeating that basic form. So I'll talk a little bit about why I disbelieve, and a little bit, hopefully, about the sorts of questions that I get asked often by my religious friends, how a life without God works. Bearing in mind, which I wasn't actually aware that we directly told not to reference other beliefs, but as this is a multi-faith discussion, I've kind of tried to keep it to broad ideas that apply to everything. There's really 3 points to bring up that cover all the bases. First off, the idea of the soul being separate from the physical brain. This, to me, looking at the scientific evidence that's been accumulating over the years, there really is nothing to make us think there's a soul outside of the brain. The other day, I stabbed myself in the finger with a pen. I pulled my hand away right away. Now, there's some things in that process we don't yet understand. It's very difficult to pick apart a brain and analyze it without wrecking into the process going on. But we do understand a lot about the nerve impulses firing through my arm and the muscle reflexes as a result of the signals being sent through the same nerves. And there's just that process in between where presumably a soul would influence you in a way that the physical brain doesn't do alone. Now, to me, to believe this, you have to assume that there's a point where the laws of physics are violated, where it's not just electrochemical reactions and molecules bouncing off of each other. Because if you're looking at that sufficiently explains that there's no reason to assume anything else. And I mean, if I hit you over the head, I could cause memory loss, short-term or long-term, depending where I hit you, or You could black out, you could have blurred vision. We actually have computers now. There's some very testable projects, but we have the ability to attach a device to your head which can move a mouse pointer for you depending on where you want it to go without saying a word or moving muscles. It's all registering things looking directly at your brain. So we can see, to some degree, the thought process actually happening at the brain level. We hook you up to the right medical equipment with the right radioactive chemicals injected into your body, and we can see which parts of the brain are acting up. We inject you with a truth serum. We can influence your personality, all based on the physical body and the physical brain. And of course, if the brain is to credit for the mind, then there's really nothing left once the brain is gone. In terms of the reasons to believe in God, there's two broad categories. There's the kind that get you to believe there is a God, and there's the kind that gets you to believe there's our God. The ones for a God are the kind of grand scale cosmological arguments. The most obvious one being what caused all of this? How did it all get here? The first cause. Now, I think most people in this room, myself included, would agree that there is something that is the foundation for everything else. The fact that that foundation may exist isn't enough to declare it God in itself. God is God because there is an intentional plan, a conscious entity, a mind at work. And if you don't have that, whatever conclusion is eventually come to is a naturalistic one, essentially. Now, given that, Stephen Hawking released a book. It's got a lot of press just in the last week. It's called The Grand Design. I haven't read it yet. My copy's in the mail. But in it, he proposes that God is unnecessary and says specifically that given a foundation based on the laws of quantum physics and gravity, Big bangs, Big Bang-like events, can arise out of what is otherwise nothing. Now, I don't pretend to understand this at any real level. Looking at a religious answer to the question, and you get something along the lines of God created everything, compare that to just an introductory textbook on cosmology, astrophysics. We can't get into the details, but the point I try to make is that this is the sort of answer we're looking for. It's something that digs deeper and deeper to the foundations of what we've understood about the universe, and based on something very simple, we can build up to the more and more complex, along the lines of what we've learned through evolution, a very simple process. Things change over time. The ones that succeed get to propagate and expand. That simple process has allowed us to be here. Given that, that's the kind of solution we're looking for. Now, it goes a little farther than that, though, from just the first cause to what's called the fine-tuning argument. The idea that there's really something to explain here, because it's not just that there's something, it's something that works incredibly well. The Earth is the right distance from the Sun, it's tilted at the right angle to have our seasonal varieties, it's got the right concentrations of water and oxygen and carbon. It is in a solar system with the right amount of heat, not too much radiation. The gravitational force has allowed stars to form, and the Big Bang hasn't collapsed in on itself. We've had time to develop. And to this, I have to say that any concern, which it is a perfectly valid concern, there is something to explain here. But to say that the things are too good to be true and things are too finely tuned, and then propose a God that is presumably perfectly tuned, it doesn't solve anything. Now, we don't know for sure what the answer is. We've only known this is a question worth considering for the last 50 years or so. But based on something like Stephen Hawking's proposition, if it is true that Big Bangs can form spontaneously, there's no reason to think this is the only one. And there are many reasons to believe that the laws of physics can vary in each circumstance. Now, we know there's about 100 billion galaxies out there. 100 billion galaxies out there, about 100 billion stars in the average galaxy, many planets among each of those stars. So the questions that concern things like the good circumstances of the Earth, it's easily explained. It's called the anthropic principle, that we only find ourselves on a planet that works, but there are many to choose from, many that don't work. The more fundamental things, like the strength of the gravitational force, is something we can measure. We can tell you what it is, but we can't explain why. And that does require an explanation. And yes, it's true, it does work out very well. Stars don't collapse into black holes right away, for example. But given any sort of universe outside the known universe, like a multi-Big Bang theory, that's the kind of naturalistic explanation that we have every reason to believe is on the right track and would work. So, moving along from these grand scale arguments for why there might be a God, there's the arguments for our God, a particular version. Now, if I were in a debate with a particular faith, I'd come up with some specific examples, but in broad terms, the kinds of arguments that I hear are along the lines of how can you explain a particular miraculous event, a divinely inspired set of laws, miracles, faith healers, God's on earth, this sort of thing. And of course, I haven't looked at all of these proposals on my own. None of us have. So how do I dismiss them all out of hand? Well, I mean, I can only be so confident, but the ones that I have read about, they haven't jumped off the page at me as divinely inspired. And maybe it's just me, but I would expect if we have a bunch of religions made by men and one made by God, which is kind of a proposal most people will stick with, you would expect it to jump off the page, make you actually say, oh my God, this is above and beyond anything any human being could come up with. But everything I've read seems within the range of human thought. The older ones often seem the more primitive ones. It all fits as I would expect it. But that's usually not good enough. We'll get specific questions about how do you explain my particular circumstance, whatever miracles or one that have occurred. Again, trying to touch on the other faiths. And to that, it's a very broad principle. Of course, whatever you're referring to is a rare event. Of course, it's going to have an explanation that is unlikely. If it weren't unlikely, that sort of thing would happen all the time. But what you've got to ask yourself is it so unlikely that given the entire population of the planet over, say, once every few hundred years, 1,000 years, these sorts of things occur, is it not at all possible that through some combination of exaggeration, confusion, misapprehension, hallucination, groupthink, mob mentality, lying, self-fulfilling prophecy, something like this couldn't occur? Because, of course, I have the unfortunate job of saying what we all know, that at best only one of us is right. It's possible we're all wrong. But at best, all but one of the faiths here today is mistaken for one of those reasons. So, are you so sure yours is so above and beyond everyone else's? I don't think so. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, it sounds a little bit depressing, I know. But I don't think it really is. So I'd like to devote a little bit of time to talking about the kinds of questions that I get asked from religious people when I say I'm not a believer. How am I doing for time, by the way?
You're at 7:01 and you have to 7:07.
All right, 6 minutes and spoke. The first question I always get asked is, how do you know what the difference is between right and wrong? Shortly followed by, what's the point of life in general? I presume this is a combination of two things. First of all, when you've got something as nebulous as a God to base everything on, to serve as your foundation, you can point to God immediately for everything. It's easy to do. And of course, people brought up in a religious environment, a church, synagogue, whatever the case may be, you'll be taught to credit God with all of these things. So it comes as no surprise to me. But we do have some answers that don't fall back on God. They're not complete, they're not perfect, unfortunately. And the stories you'll hear tonight are probably going to be ones about hope and faith and redemption and justice, and we don't always have that. But I'd like to tell you a little about what we do have. Well, first let me just say, when people say something to me like, I couldn't live in a world without God, as somebody who's never believed, it comes across rather like saying, I wouldn't want to live in a world where I can't fly. I'd love to fly. If it was taken away from me when I had it, I'd feel very disappointed. But I don't personally get the same reaction, the same sympathy out of it that I might otherwise. So I try and picture what it's like for a religious person. And maybe it's presumptuous, but I kind of use the framework of a romantic relationship. It's one that's unique, that is pervasive throughout your life, that's very deep and intimate. And I can totally understand how if I went to a happily married man and told him, your wife isn't who you think she is, you're deceiving yourself, obviously they wouldn't just not believe it, they wouldn't want to hear it, and I sympathize with that. So I don't just want to be the bearer of bad news. I want to remind you, first off, that all the things that you justify as being part of God's creation are still there if God isn't. The sun still rises, you still have friends and family, and that sort of thing is that's what gets me up in the morning. I think it's a bit of a disservice to your friends and family to say that there's no point in life without God. It's true that you're not necessarily the center of the universe. God's plan didn't revolve around you according to my worldview anyway. But you still have those around you who care about you, and some people don't. So I think we're lucky. I think there is something there to appreciate. And as for the moral question, I don't really consider it to be directly concerned with the existence of God, but it's brought up in every debate on religion without fail. And so I'll just say that it sounds a bit arbitrary to some people, I think. The answer is, of course, that evolution has guided a process wherein we've come to feel these feelings for one another, compassion and stewardship and whatnot, because that's what works. And you say, well, some species eat their young in a pinch, so isn't that kind of arbitrary? And no, I don't think it is. We are a species that grew up in an environment where we would live in small groups with our families. We'd spend our entire lives in that situation. We would invest a great deal in our young and look after one another. It's no wonder that we love and care for each other so much. And at the same time, this highlights a massive hole in our morality, because you're all here listening to me today while children are starving in Africa. I'm here speaking. If someone in this audience was suffering in some way, had a heart attack on the spot, we'd all immediately stop what we're doing. But because it's out of sight and out of mind, and that's not something we had to deal with before, there's that blind spot. So it's not perfect. I wish it was, but it isn't. But there's a reason it basically works. And now that we're in a world where we do interact with larger communities, hopefully we can develop that same sense of compassion around the world and find our own place in life. I wish there's a lot more I'd like to cover, didn't have a chance. So I really encourage you to ask questions. I'm not on the boxes, you might have noticed. There's no atheist position here, or atheist as my board says. So I'm sure if you jot something in the margin, they'll point to me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all very much for listening.
Is your God? And there is a mic on the table, I see there. So, in what form is your God?
No, I can't see them when it says there.
That's a simple question to answer. In our culture, we first find ourselves in the center of our heart. To experience love in its purest form. Right from there, once you connect with that, you connect with the universal energy from one end of the universe to the other. And in that place, you're in the place of what we know as God as a creator. And it's the most beautiful place to be able to walk in that place, to think in that place, to work in that place, and to exist in that place of pure love, peace, and unity with all things at all times. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a total freedom within. So it's very easy. You find yourself there, and you will find God. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to allow at this point that's somewhat on topic There's a number of them here that aren't, and I apologize to those. The question is the existence of God. So this does go to perhaps a semantical way of asking a question of our atheist speaker. If this is a world religious conference, are you as an atheist admitting to the atheistic belief being a form of religion, in that by faith you believe your point of view, knowing that you cannot prove 100% that there is no God? So basically challenging the premise of your existence here being maybe believing that there is faith. I don't know.
Well, it's actually a good question. Richard Dawkins, he's probably the most famous vocal atheist around. He was actually complaining. He set up a charity, the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. And he was complaining that when he set this up, he had to fill out all this paperwork to get registered as a charity, justifying how reason or science could benefit society. If he just marked religion as the reason for the charity, it would have been easy. But he stuck to the principle that it wasn't a religion. You might have heard a short little phrase that I think sums it up. Atheism is a religion like not collecting stamps is a hobby. If there has to be a position, I only think it qualifies as a religion if it is either, and I probably shouldn't pigeonhole like this, but there's no doctrines, there's no text, there's no faith. It's just a definition of a position. You're right. I can't say I know it 100%. I don't say that. But to the degree that we all have the same evidence, we have to come to some evaluation of the probabilities, and that's all I'm doing. If we were to in some way, and I don't think you could, but if in some way we were to prove the atheist position, I don't think you'd then call it a religion. So it's not about what it is, and it's certainly not about faith. So I say no, not a religion.
Language that we use, so I just want to clarify that. So I think it's worth 1 minute each to speak to why do you, and it was not specific as to you and who, refer to God as He. And I think that's a good one, and maybe we'll start with Devinder, because he did address that particular question. So we'll start at this end of the table and move down. I'm going to turn it up. Maybe you want to stand here, Devinder? So, I think I've pretty much covered it. We don't consider God a he or she. It's in both forms in the Guru style. Like I said, we more consider God the Guru Shabad, the sound current, more or less to translate, the Guru Shabad. So, the sound current is what we believe. It's the vibration that covers all life, all the universe, not a he or she. Again, how do you put a name on something and define it? Thank you.
This book in front of me is written by Dr. Deepak Chopra, How to Know God. He tackles this question, and I'm going to read it out for just a few lines, and that'll be in next 30 seconds so I can have 1 minute. He says finding a pronoun for, he uses the he. So he says that finding a pronoun for God is not easy. In keeping with common tradition, this book uses he, but surely God transcends all gender. I could have rotated 3 different pronouns, he, she, and it, but that would not have gotten any nearer to the truth, and it would have made for very clumsy reading. So the only way we describe as a he in the Holy Quran is because of his might, and normally with man it comes like strength and all that. Not that we're not strong, but I'm just talking about generally speaking, man is considered to be like a big thing. So for that purpose, it is used he. Otherwise, as the doctor says, and I agree, he's not he, he's not she, he's not it. He's a being, he's a light, he's energy, so whatever you call. So energy is something which is around us. So that's why we have this he gender to describe him. If I would have called him she, then men would have called him. So You have to call it something, just for the person.
Okay, next, Father Terry.
So, Jesus is the He. And the way that Jesus treated people in his day is the revelation of Christianity, that men and women are equal in God's eyes. There were so many stories in Scripture. The woman caught in adultery was dragged in full view of everyone to be stoned to death for her sin. Jesus could see the hypocrisy of that. There was a man involved, obviously. And for her to be dragged in full view, where's the man? So the equality of men and women is just latent in the Scripture. I think the discussion of male and female is sort of a hot button topic today. But Jesus revealed God as Father, but it transcends the male and female today, because we know that God is transcendent and God is mystery, and God is neither male nor female, but Jesus referred to him as Father in the genitive sense. So for Christianity, male and female are one and equal and the same. There's no such thing as male dominance. That's what's been revealed in Christianity through Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Frank.
In our culture, there is no words that we use that identifies as a he. In our tradition, in our way of life, we identify Creator, the perfect balance of male and female energy. And what we learn in this work and walk on the ancient trail of our ancestors is to identify the perfect formula of the male and female energy of all creation. And me as a man, to find myself there, first I must respect and honor my sisters, big time. And when I find myself there, I find a balance of the male energy in that same realm, that we are very special, that we are very sacred. Without each other, life does not exist. So if it's straight he, then how can life exist? If it's a straight she, how can life exist? There has to be a he and she to make things happen. So it takes man to bring themselves to that perfect balance of understanding the Creator of the male and female energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Ed?
Well, obviously my opinion isn't quite on the same level as it will be for other speakers. There's actually a movement among feminists. It was popular a number of decades ago, but it was a problem they brought up, that specifically with the Abrahamic religions, that God didn't seem to always put women on the same level. Most of the prophets and most of the miracles, Jesus, male figures, women didn't get the same quality of treatment. Not that that's a religious thing. In all societies, women got the short end of the stick for a very long time. I would tend to agree that I address God as his followers treat him, and for that reason, I do use the male pronoun. I think most of the traits people think of when they picture God are male. But I do acknowledge there are some theologians and people who take a little bit more care with this, and there's a valid case to be made that, as an argument, God doesn't have to be male. So those are my thoughts on it anyway.
Thank you, Ben.